As you do when you're about to present at an event like this, in the morning in the shower, you start to run through what you're going to speak about. And actually, this morning in the shower, maybe too much information, I started to think about yesterday's talks and some of the themes that came out yesterday. And what I thought was interesting is that even though this event, all of the people have been challenged to consider the future and come and talk about the future, but the spine of yesterday, the sub-theme of yesterday, actually became sustainability. So even when we were speaking about AI, actually those AI models were being used to create soups that would save endangered species. When we spoke about growing lab-grown meat, we were looking at protecting the environment. Even when we spoke about traditional cuisines, this was about sustaining tradition, presenting it authentically. And towards the end of the day as well, we had great talks about farming and the amazing storyteller Dan Saladino, who spoke about communities that are protecting endangered ingredients and why that's important for the future. But I just found it really interesting that even though all of these people were challenged to think about the future, collectively, without any prompt, they all thought that the future ticked this box of sustainability. And I think that's a really nice thing. And it was also good for me because actually today I want to speak about sustainability from an angle that we very rarely talk about, which is human sustainability, the sustainability of the people that create restaurants for us and how important that is. For years now, I've had 7 words in my Instagram bio, and it's 7 words that I truly believe in, 7 words that I think are very true to life. And that is that the table is the stage of life. And that might seem a bit grandiose, but I truly believe that the table is the stage of life. And what do I mean when I say something like that? There's a certain power at the table of gathering together. I'm sure we've all felt it. We're all passionate about restaurants. And it doesn't matter if that table is a high-end fine dining restaurant, a mom and pop bistro, or a makeshift table that we make in the park by throwing a rug on the floor and all sitting around together. When we share, when we eat together, there's a jolt of energy, I think, that we get. And we spend a lot of time saying this had the juiciest chicken, or this was the best smash burger I've ever eaten, and yesterday smash burger was one of the best smash burgers I've ever eaten. But we rarely focus on the power of the moments that we get to share when we're sitting at the table. Just think about it. How many birthdays have you celebrated around the table? In cultures around the world, weddings will at some point happen around the table. You even have the top table, and that's around the world across many different cultures. Like myself, I'm sure many of you have had first dates at the table. And sadly also, like myself, probably too many times, many of you have also had last dates at the table as well. We choose tables to deliver the good news in life, and we also choose them to deliver oftentimes the bad news because we feel safe. We feel that this is a place we can share. And I'll summarize this with one particular moment for me, which happened around the table. 7, 8 years ago, I lost my mum, and anyone who's in the, that doesn't make me special. Everyone's experienced grief, but everyone knows that when this happens, the first thing that happens is you stop eating. It's why everyone comes to your house and gives you food and delivers food to you. And me, my brother and sister, we weren't looking after ourselves, and my dad arrived and he said, look, I'm taking you for a meal. And we thought it was crazy. Like, the last thing we want to do right now is go out and sit in public. I hadn't washed for days and hadn't eaten for days, and the last thing I wanted to do was sit at the table. But as a parent, he was worried we weren't looking after ourselves, and he forced us to go for this meal together. And we went to this restaurant and we sat outside, and I ordered a soup. Simple soup, because I was like, that's probably all I can manage right now, is a soup. And anyone who's experienced it, when you haven't eaten for a long time and you get something great, something fresh, something made with love, it kind of opens you up and suddenly you're starving. And I said this, I looked to my dad, I said, dude, I'm starving right now. I don't know where it's come from, but I'm ravenous. And about 5 minutes after saying that, a waiter arrived at the table, and he brought some focaccia and some hams and some cheeses, and he said, "On the house, I know what you're going through." And he just disappeared as easily as he arrived. And that could be intrusive. That's a bold move in service to make it. That's a step into someone's personal life, and done wrong, done in the wrong way, it would actually feel a bit off. But it was done in a gentle, compassionate way, a genuine, compassionate way. And for me, it became one of the most profound acts of service I've ever had. They weren't just serving us food at this table. They were truly nourishing us in every sense of the word. And we sat and we ate at this table together, and we finally started to look each other in the eye, these guilty glances that happen through grief, and we started to speak into the ominous silence that had sort of overgone us for the last few days. And towards the end of the meal, this waiter arrived again with, in Paris, I live in France, I live in Paris, they call it Café Gourmand, small plate of cakes. Just in case you want something sweet, this is from the chef. And he disappeared again. And we sat and we talked and we hugged and we cried and we nibbled down on these sweet foods that I would have never ordered them. Like, it would never come to my mind that I needed that, but that sweetness lifted us as well. And I started to get worried. I was like, we've been here for hours. And we said to them, we're really sorry. You know, when a restaurant's cleaned down and you're the only table left and you feel a bit bad for them. Oh, don't worry, they said, don't worry. We're only getting ready for dinner service. And about a year later, I went back and I said to them, like, guys, that was truly amazing. I just wanted to tell you how special that was, what you did for us. And it was more healing, that moment with my family, than the months of therapy I did after that. It was such a healing act. And they were so nonchalant about it. No worries. That's our job. That's what they said. That's our job. And that's the thing. Night after night, restaurants set a stage for us to experience life. And that's what I mean by the table is the stage of life. And they're not always happy moments, but they create this safe space for us. As Will Gadara once said to me, and I think it's very true, when you start to look at hospitality in this sense, it might be the most noble profession in the world. But while chefs and their staff spend all of this time, all of their lives taking care of us, creating this space, wiping it down, rinsing and repeating, so we can have this special moments at the table that we all have, sourcing ingredients and focusing on the sustainability of their supply chain. Who is caring for the sustainability of these people? That's the question I kind of want to pose today, and hopefully bring a little bit of inspiration around that topic. And that's why Michelle set me up so well, and I didn't pay her to do that, I promise. There is an industry problem, and there are figures to show that there's an industry problem. 81% of chefs have experienced poor mental health at some point in their career. That's a shockingly high number. Anxiety, depression, years spent cooking without daylight, all those missed moments that happen when you work in a restaurant because you can't get a time off to spend with your family and friends. At the same time, restaurants have the highest resignation rates than any other industry in the US. We speak about the problem of hiring, and there's this costly revolving door of staff that are leaving the restaurant industry. And that's sad, it shouldn't be the case. Perhaps more shockingly is this figure, which is that chefs and cooks sit at 18th on the list of occupations with the highest rate of suicides. Now, you might be in the audience saying, well, there's 17 other professions that are higher than that, but some context on that number. If we had 100,000 chefs in this room, Nadal would, one, be exceptionally happy because Lengua would have reached mass growth. But if we had 100,000 chefs in this room, 65 of them will commit suicide. The national average of this number, if you combine all occupations, is just 32. So chefs are double the national average. Even one is too much, Even one is too much. These statistics are really sobering. Suicide rates in the industry are disproportionately high. And of course, we all remember the famous names, the famous tragedies like the late Anthony Bourdain. There's actually a candle in the green room, Saint of Bourdain candle burning in the green room. In 2024, there was another study done that showed that half of restaurant workers have admitted at some point in their careers to thinking about suicide or self-harm while working. This is not just a restaurant industry crisis, this is a human crisis. So when we sit at the table, next time we're there and we're breaking bread and we're having these special moments as we share laughter or tears, whatever it is that we're doing at that moment, let's start to recognize the people that are making these moments possible. Because restaurants are taking care of us. It's their job, that's what they do, and they do it very well. Who is taking care of them? There's many reasons that contribute to poor mental health of kitchen staff. Kitchens are grueling, they're high-pressure jobs. I'm sure chefs in the audience would know that. Hours are long, recovery time is short. Time off, in many cases, is non-existent. Healthcare in the US, also in many cases, non-existent. And that leads to other issues. Another survey that was done in the US revealed that 51% of food workers always or have frequently worked while sick. And I'm sure you've all done it because there's a culture of turning up even when you're sick, pushing through the pain. 38% said that they would sometimes work while sick, and only 5% said that they never went to work sick. There's one story I always think about when I hear this. It's about a young sous chef from England, a chap called Nathan Leahy. I've spoken about him before as well. Another sad story. Sorry, this does uplift at some point. But Nathan was a chef rising the ranks of fine dining, some of the most grueling kitchens, if anyone's ever worked in that kitchen brigade system, working 100-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks. And Nathan died because of untreated tonsillitis. How many people have had tonsillitis? My tonsils have been removed. It's not an illness you should be dying from, untreated tonsillitis. Nathan's mum discovered his body in his bed on Mother's Day. On Mother's Day. And she spoke a lot about it. She spoke about those 100-hour weeks and said some really startling stuff. Just one trip to the doctor would have saved him. But he was ambitious. Think about that. How many chefs here have pushed through a niggling pain or taken a painkiller to get through a shift to prove their ambition? This is just the physical impact of restaurants as well. This is just that physical hit of restaurants. With the no breaks, the no healthcare, a kitchen culture that demands that you show up even when you're sick, or continue working when your body is hurting. Less discussed is the mental health issue because it's less obvious. People don't share it as much. But, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, all prevalent in this amazing industry full of passionate, creative people that dedicate their lives to caring for us. I'm here today because we need to start talking more about these issues. We need to start bringing them to light because when you talk about things, you start to understand the problem more, and it helps just having conversations around it, being vulnerable, sharing these things together. We need to start to really highlight the leaders that are finding solutions on this, and I also believe we need to step outside of the kitchen and speak to experts that have never worked in restaurants that can offer advice and guidance to people who do work in restaurants. Because the future of this amazing industry depends on us fixing this problem. And the great thing is you are creative, solution-based people. Chefs will always find a solution, no? And I think by engaging in this conversation, we can do that. And we must, because those amazing tables, those stages, they don't set themselves. And we can't address a problem until we start to understand it. And to understand a problem, we have to talk about it. That's why I recently launched a podcast which is called Heard. I'm not professing to be fixing this problem because it's layered, it's deep, there's lots of issues we need to discuss here. But our aim is just to put a little bit of rest back in restaurants, to bring a bit of inspiration to the industry, to start to encourage discussions and show examples of leaders inside the industry and outside the industry that can help with some of the problems that the industry is having. And we speak about all sorts. It's been in production. In fact, Nadal's sick of hearing about it. It's been in production for over a year and a half. We've interviewed so many people for this, and we just launched a couple of days ago. And again, I'm not standing here as the savior, as someone who's going to fix this entire industry. But I do think if we can just be a tiny drop in a discussion that's growing, an ocean that's growing, then I think we've done our job. And we discuss all sorts, and I brought some clips from the people that we have conversations with, and we discuss mental health very openly, very honestly, and how that can impact your business.
Most of the people that I have lost at Field Trip were because of mental health, right? They needed to go because they were dealing with X. And if I still had a lot of those people, we'd be a stronger company. We wouldn't be searching for many people from the outside. We'd be able to train better. I think we'd put out better food, all these things. You just need to be able to go talk to somebody and them to say, I heard you. Are you okay today?
And so many chefs echoed what JJ Johnson was saying there. And JJ was actually here last year as a speaker at Lengua. What we often don't think about is the major costs associated with this issue as well. So we started to look at that, and we spoke to some experts who've done a lot of data and a lot of investigations on what this actually costs the industry.
We are constantly running models of what it means and the impact of adding benefits to your company, what it means for retention, how expensive is it to train and onboard. And a stat that kind of goes around, it takes about $5,000 to $7,000 to onboard someone. So every time you're turning, it's an immense expense to your company. And I think a lot of operators we're working with, they're saying, okay, well, if I want to contribute more benefits, then maybe we actually stay leaner. Maybe our teams are a little bit smaller, but we invest in them more. Maybe we take away a day of service in order not to increase our labor by 40%, or cut lunch, or cut breakfast, or whatever it may be. And so we help them run those models.
And Elizabeth is amazing. She runs a company called OS Benefits, and they try to help the restaurant industry in providing those benefits and maybe building leaner teams. So they do have the finances in the bank to be able to provide some of these benefits. But you'll hear more from Elizabeth as we go through this. One of the positive things here, one of the great motivating things is that chefs are starting to now openly discuss this issue, admit that there's a problem, like Michelle did there, and start to look for solutions.
I think it all starts with people focusing on your own mental health and really taking care of your mind as well as your body, I think is the biggest, most important step towards improvement.
And while they look for these solutions, they're also coming up with amazing ideas and unique ideas of how they might fix this. Like JJ, who you heard from there at the beginning, he thinks that they should have a performance coach working in HR, a bit like a sports team would have, someone who's there, who can offer sort of guidance to the team to keep them at optimum, keep their mental health in balance. And he's got some really interesting ideas, and he's a true character.
I hope that I can employ somebody that my team can go to and sit on the couch like billions, because these corporate offices have it for these guys that lose money, like trade money, and they lose a lot of money and they need to go talk to somebody so they don't feel bad. We don't have that outlet. So I hope to have that one day, a part of like HR, right? That person's HR, or in side by side, where you can go sit on the couch. There's a comfy room. They give you maybe some Skittles. I don't know, right? Some macaroons. And you talk through whatever it is, and you can walk out feeling like a better person. Wendy keeps you on track so you don't mentally crack.
First of all, what an interesting food pairing. Skittles and macaroons, that's his comfort food, I guess. I don't know if anyone's seen Billions, but it's a fictional show. It's about traders that are trading massive amounts of money in New York. They have someone who works in their team called Wendy Rhodes. She's a performance coach, and when they get down, when they're having a fight at home, she's there to sort of support them and guide them. And it might seem crazy, but when JJ said this, I was like, this must exist. And so we went out and we found the real life Wendy Rhodes, and we said, hey, here's some points from JJ. JJ's got some issues, and we sort of do a dialogue between JJ and this performance coach, and she sort of provided some guidance for him.
You ask if you're motivating your team enough. I would ask how you're motivating your team. When you talk about push, 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 what motivates you? The last time someone screamed at you, was that the time that you said, I'm excited? You don't think twice about doing that in cultures where it's normalized. But yelling at someone to push is not effective motivation. They know already that they're in a pressure cooker. Having that on top of it probably increases anxiety and pressure. And we know that when we do that, with increased anxiety comes increased mistakes. Changing things, on the dial just a few notches has an extraordinary impact.
Dr. Julie was amazing. Like, I came off the phone, like, could I ever afford someone like this to sort of guide me through life? And she really puts fuel in your veins, this lady. And she often works with very large companies, with CEOs that have just been given lots of money and they feel a bit paralyzed, and she sort of guides them through. She also works with the teams as well. And in that episode, she has this back and forth with JJ and kind of helps him as a chef and as a business owner. We didn't just speak about the mental health issues as well. We found an amazing scientist, a physiologist actually, that's wired chefs up with biometric devices. So we could get some raw data on how does work in the line impact you? What happens to your body? And this is a guy called Oliver Patrick, who actually created the world's most expensive health screening test. Often he's working with very high net worth individuals on extending their life, taking their blood every couple of days and showing them how to extend their life. But in the last few months, he's been doing research where he wired up some really famous chefs. I won't mention names because it's coming out in a documentary and he asked me not to, but we have some information on what he discovered from all of this data he got from chefs working the line.
They do not get any physiological recovery in waking hours. Sleep is disturbed post-shift from the adrenalized state that they can't decompress from the combination of alcohol, from potential late or misuse of caffeine, from the absence of darkness, from the perpetual noise. And we have an inadequate physiological recovery crisis across hospitality that isn't a crisis for younger people, but it is if you don't adapt to that in later years.
And we also said, okay, how do you come down? Because I'm sure the chefs in this audience have had that adrenalized state of like, shit, how do I sleep better? And what's interesting with Ollie is stress is not a problem. Stress is when some of the best things happen. When you're in that flow state of being a little bit pressured. I don't want to change that. That's actually when a lot of creativity happens and a lot of interesting ideas come out. It's the inadequate recovery after that stress. It's not having that time to really come down. So we said, how can you get better at recovering after a night like that on the line?
I would look at managing midweek alcohol. I would have you on low intensity cardio. I'd have you sharing. I'd have you in nature. I would have you delegating. And unequivocally, I will improve your energy in a relatively small period of time.
And there's a whole episode with Ollie where he goes into this in very in-depth way, and a lot of it's common sense. But when you hear an expert like that that's being paid millions to do this for people around the world, and he's got the data to prove these issues, I think it has a bit more of an impact. He mentions alcohol so much because we all think that a few beers after service or a few glasses of wine is the best way to fall asleep. In fact, you do fall asleep better when you've had a bit of alcohol. We all know that. But your sleep is not good sleep. It's not quality sleep. It's fragmented. And this is a major problem. Inadequate recovery is one of the major problems. So we said, I've never encountered a team that doesn't drink together after service. Is there one? Is there a team that's managed to bond and create camaraderie without that alcohol and bonding around the bar after service? Because in restaurants, you have that proximity to alcohol. No, it's there all the time. And we found a great chef that's built a team that doesn't drink at all.
The team don't drink, so that's our end of the night situation, you know what I mean?
Mate, if you got a team that doesn't drink, that's already a big step. Mm-hmm. How did you get them to buy into that?
That's the accountability. And also, you got to set boundaries. When I took over this restaurant, I told everybody at the meeting, I don't drink, I don't smoke anymore. I procured the team. All of them are family guys. Got kids, got wives, you got somebody else to be accountable for. I chose those type of people to be in my team.
Harold's an amazing character as well, and I have to apologize a little bit because this is obviously an event that's all about the future, and I've been called out for using a picture of myself from the past. Stepping away from the physical and the mental health issues that you all saw there, the cost, $5 to $7 of onboarding someone, the fact that we have this revolving door, the fact that people like JD are thinking about having performance coaches because that's probably more efficient for keeping their team. We also wanted to look at the structure of restaurants and what does that do? The organizational structure of restaurants, the history of restaurants. Restaurants are very much based on tradition. They haven't changed very much for over 100 years. Many of the high-end restaurants are literally following a model that was designed over 100 years ago by Escoffier. So we wanted to kind of look at that a little bit as well.
Modern restaurant culture is based in the French military system, right? And there is this sort of general idea that when you are in command, other people do what you say without question.
There's the head guy, the general, the executive chef. Then there's the lieutenants, sous chefs. You have the sergeants, the junior sous chef, and then you got the foot soldiers, which are the line cooks.
It's sort of like going to war, but without fearing that you're going to die.
No one should fear they're going to war or that they're going to die during a shift, especially not a chef, maybe a soldier. And what's interesting is wrongly parroted the Escoffier's model, the brigade system. Just for anyone who doesn't know this is the organizational structure of restaurants. It's what allows me to have the chicken, you to have the lamb, someone else to have a cold dish. It all arrive at the same time, no sauce is broken. It's essentially a production line. And even though we say it's based on the French military, that's not true. We found people that have spent a long time researching this. It's based on factory work. It's based on breaking down a job into small, manageable tasks. And ironically, the idea of that system was created to free up the time of chefs, give them more time for leisure. But what's interesting is if you think about that clip, the language that's used, very warlike language. You've heard, yes, chef. It's very similar to the military. We're going up against the ticket machine. Let's fight together. Harold explaining it, the generals, the foot soldiers. Language plays a big role in culture as well. And that can also define and start to normalize certain behaviors. And we found this amazing sociologist that spent years researching the culture of kitchens. Also looking at how food media plays a role in romanticizing and normalizing bad behavior. And there's a whole episode on that. But this is just a bit from Ellen Miser. She's from Hawaii University. And she speaks really passionately about the importance of thinking about the language you use to describe a culture.
When you have a lot of, we're going into war, let's buck up everybody, the general is calling the shots. The tickets are coming in and we got to conquer it. The ticket machine is clicking at you and it's chaos. You have your troop and you're trying to win for the night. So that can be thought of as another source of kind of normalizing that violence or normalizing that abusive feeling.
And I'm sorry for any chefs in the audience with the ticket machine because almost every chef we spoke to was like, I go to bed and I hear the chur. I can't sleep, it's always there, it plagues me. If someone would make a fortune if they just made a soft sounding ticket machine. And alongside all this stuff and the physical impacts and the language we use and the structures and the mental health implications of kitchens, there's these structural changes that are needed that won't just come from restaurants, structural changes that we probably need governmental assistance on. We need laws changing as well. And Amanda Cohen speaks amazingly on this topic.
We still need better wages. We need to make healthcare more affordable. And we need to make childcare a priority, work-life balance. Somewhere between those four, you'll have a much more sustainable, successful industry.
And we went on a mission. We were like, okay, there must be a healthcare solution. There must be someone creating something out there. And that was Elizabeth from OS Benefits, who spent a couple of years trying to understand how to create a cooperative healthcare system for the restaurant industry that would bring down the cost for employees and employers And she's done it. And Elizabeth's fascinating. And if you want to do this in your restaurant or you want to do it for yourself personally, I suggest you visit OS Benefits because they're an amazing company.
We knew that there had to be a way. And maybe it's ignorance or grit that allowed us to get here, but we just pushed and pushed and pushed. I talked to every carrier, I talked to every insurance company, brokers, to try to figure out how can we tap into this market because there has to be a way through. And in May of 24, we were able to broker and to secure 4 ACA compliant healthcare plans.
And this is the great thing. This is the positive thing of this talk and this podcast is there's so many people within this industry finding really practical solutions to these problems. We wanted to look a little bit at that gap that happens between front of house and back of house. I'm sure you've all experienced that as well. Certainly in a place like New York, where Amanda Cohen is from, you can have the front of house earning double what the back of house is earning. And that's because the tipping system in many states doesn't allow sharing. Tips cannot be shared with the service workers and the kitchen staff. This creates a discrepancy in something that's often described as a family, and it's quite frankly unfair. It's an unfair system. So how do you fix that? How do you go against that? And Amanda has done that. She's banned tipping in her restaurant. The service charge is included, and that means that she can pay what she calls a living wage to both sides. And you might think all the waiters are going to leave, but actually Amanda said some of them did, but some of them prefer knowing how much they're going to earn every month. Not being at the whim of the weather or a flood or a hurricane or a bad week of business because no one comes in the restaurant. They're not fluctuating anymore. They can plan life a little bit better. And the cohesion that it creates in her restaurant is much better as well. But this came at an immense cost to Amanda as well, but she's sticking by it.
I realized that New York had really lost a lot of cooks. Cooks were going to other cities. So I had to figure out a way to pay my cooks more. I can't unsee what I've seen. It's a bad system. Again, it's racist. It's sexist. I don't want to participate in it, even if it means I might have a more successful restaurant.
And I won't get into why it's sexist or racist. You can hear about that in an episode, but it's true. It's based on racist history, quite sexist history. But what's interesting is this costs Amanda a lot of money to do. Because as soon as you get rid of tipping and put it as part of a cost, your taxes go up. You're immediately adding 20% onto what your restaurant takes. And it's a double hit because your insurance goes up as well, because your insurance is based on how much money you're taking. Amanda predicts that this probably costs her about between $500,000 and $1 million a year to do, but refuses to do it any other way, and thinks that this is a much fairer way of paying everyone in her restaurant what she calls a living wage. It is needed, this. The industry, we realize very quickly, is crying out for help.
Who is my mentor that I'm supposed to look up to? There should be some institution here. And we have all these institutions and all these stupid awards in this stupid industry. How is it the thing that anyone complains about is what I'm talking about? How is it that in the industry, there's no one saying, okay, set up a 501c3, let's deal with this? Where is the institution? Where's the publication?
And he's right, and this was what stayed with me at night. I've been a food journalist for 15 years. Have I done enough? Have I helped combat this issue? I've spoken about it a lot, but what have I done to help? And it was partly that conversation that led me down this path, but it also made me say, well, who is that 501c3? That was Greg Backstrom from an amazing restaurant in New York, Olmsted. Who is that 501c3 that's helping the industry? And it didn't take long to find it. And of course, because you're solution-based, because you're so creative, that solution came from within the industry with Chris Shepherd.
I'm really happy, and I think that we still have a long way to go because I still think that there's such a stigma to the actual saying, hey, I need to talk to somebody. Because most people are like, no, I'm good. And then it's like, you're not good, man. Nobody's that good. I'm just going to say it. We all need to talk to people no matter what. It shouldn't have to take you losing a friend to make that decision, right? You need to listen to yourself. There's options out there. And we just want to be that option for people. I don't want to see a day where people make a decision and not be here with us.
And Chris set up an amazing organization. You should put it in your saved emails, in your saved websites. It's called southernsmoke.org. They offer relief funds that chefs and restaurant owners can apply for when there's been major issues like a hurricane or a flood. But they also offer free mental health care sessions for people working in the US restaurant industry. They do this by teaming up with universities, working with PhD students that need to get their hours, a bit like a pilot. They need to get X number of hours to qualify. And this allows them to offer free mental health care services for people working in the US restaurant industry. And if they're not in your state, don't worry when you go to visit them, because you can also just apply for what they call a mini relief fund. And that, if you're going to use that for mental health care advice, they'll support you in that way as well. And their plan is to eventually roll this out nationwide. And what's interesting as well is just how many chefs are using this service.
When we opened it in Houston, it took a little bit and then it just took off. And then when we opened in New York, it went on a wait list in 48 hours. The universities will tell you that therapy is something that people will stop doing, right? And the hospitality, food and beverage industry doesn't really have a great track record with people with longevity, but our universities in New York are like, we're 100%. Like, nobody leaves. They go through the whole program. California was always one of our states that was like, it's available, but people don't really use it. And we always have slots open, but even, I think it was about a month and a half ago, we had 2 chefs in LA that died by suicide within a week. Then awareness started to happen of what we're doing. And I think we increased by 150% immediately overnight.
Chris is super inspirational. He set this Southern Smoke up with his wife, Lindsay. They are machines for raising money, for supporting the industry when it's in crisis. And just really check out southernsmoke.org, because they're doing so much more than we're doing with our little podcast. Over the course of a year and a half, I've interviewed over 30 people for this series: psychologists, doctors, scientists, sociologists, and so many chefs. And I do not think, I say again, I am not going to suddenly change the industry, and I'm not naive or egotistical enough to think that I can. But I think these conversations are very important, and if we can provide a little bit of practical information and achievable inspiration, we've done our job. We must protect the future of kitchens because, as I said in the beginning, and hopefully showed you in the beginning, they're super important culturally to us. One of the great things I realized is that young chefs are really on top of this. Like, they are finding the solutions. The next generation, they're determined to find solutions to this. And as Kenji said,
I do think there's a general shift in the culture and the thinking about this, which has been really heartening to see.
Well, that's where the change will come from, no?
The next generation, for sure.
And it's true. That is where the biggest changes will come from, the next generation. And many of that next generation are in this room today and were in this room yesterday. So please, I ask you all, not just the next generation, but the current generation, keep focusing on this, please. Keep building more compassionate teams. Keep challenging the status quo. Seek some of the guidance from these amazing initiatives that we found. There's so many more. We highlighted just a few in the series, but there's so many amazing initiatives like this, because we have to protect this amazing industry. I love this industry. I don't cook, but I appreciate this industry so much. It's full of some of the most creative, innovative people, passionate people I've ever met. And I also know that not everyone in this room is a chef. So what can we do when we're regular consumers? What's our role in this? I mean, we can choose where we spend our money. And it's not always easy to understand which restaurant is looking after their staff, but many of them speak about it. Many of them get written about. Many of them show it on the menu by saying this is a no-tipping restaurant. So don't give them stick for being a no-tipping restaurant. Realize that what they're trying to do is create a fairer system between the front of house and the back of house. Just the other day, I was having another meal with my dad, much less depressing than the meal we spoke about at the beginning. I was actually in Liverpool getting a passport because I needed a fresh passport to come here. And as I was scanning down the menu, deciding what we were going to eat, I saw on the menu invisible chips, £6, well, £4, but $6 to you. $6 for invisible chips. These chips will go towards supporting endeavors that are impacting the hospitality industry for positive things. $6 it was just to donate. I thought it was a really cool idea to see that on the menu. And it's funny because we ordered 2 portions of those chips. And the guy came up to us and was like, I have to let you know there's no chips that are going to arrive. There is no fries. This is not like some Ferran Adria molecular invisible fries. So someone's obviously ordered them expecting a plate of chips. We ordered 2 portions, and honestly, that was the most delicious plate that we ate that day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, for
Thank you for having
such
me.
a touching topic. You reminded me in management. Of course, I'm not a chef or don't run a restaurant, but in management, we always say, like, what if you spend all that money in education and people leave? And we tell them, why if you don't and they stay? No? And it happens the same with restaurants investing in their team's well-being. No? At the end of the day, they're the most valuable resource for a restaurant.
And they cost so much to
Yeah,
onboard. It costs
exactly.
so much to get these people.
Exactly. Of course, we've talked about it. You've been doing this for a couple of years. What reaction do you get usually from chefs when you invite them to a podcast, but you tell them, hey, we're not gonna talk about your trajectory as a chef or your latest restaurant or book. We're gonna talk about well-being. We're gonna talk about your wellness. What reaction do you get?
Surprisingly open, actually, because I think, and I've been doing this job for 15 years. There's no way I could have had this conversation 15 years ago, probably not 10 years ago, but in the last 5 years, I think we've started to open up together and share a little bit more and be a little bit more vulnerable in general, not just within the industry. Obviously, I spoke to more males than females because that's unfortunately still the imbalance of the industry, and men struggle even more to open up. We're getting good at it. We're getting better at it. But I was surprised by how quickly it was to sort of remove the wall and get past their PR story and actually have honest conversations. And you have to treat it, if you're speaking to someone who's sharing a mental health struggle or a crisis that they've been through, you have to treat it really sensitively.
Does it take you a while to speak to them until they actually open? Because
Yeah.
it's hard to talk about it, even with your partner, with your friend. Imagine with somebody who's interviewing you for a podcast that thousands of people, hopefully hundreds of thousands of people will listen.
Yeah, and my producer hates it because she's like, just go in, get the clips, do 25 minutes. And I'm like, oh, sorry, it was an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And it's the classic thing as a journalist, especially in radio, especially in audio. When you're working fast-paced, you'd be like, hey, just give me a 30-second clip on this. When I worked in news, it's the power of podcasts, though. I think you've got a little bit more time, you've got a bit more space to breathe. And you can't get someone to open up in the first 20 minutes. Often it's just bonding together in that first 20 minutes.
And I was gonna ask you later, but I'll do it now. Why a podcast? I mean, you've been writing about food and restaurants for many years. You can do video. Why a podcast for this?
I think it is that space to breathe. First of all, it's my favorite medium. Like I started my career in radio. I think audio's the most powerful medium still, mainly because it's passive. Because you consume audio while you clean, while you drive the car. And there's lots of figures on this that I often use in pitch decks when we're trying to get people to sponsor this podcast, about the impact that the audio has on you when you consume it passively. And then people are used to longer podcasts. I would have made these much longer. Again, I have a wonderful producer who's like, dude, we're not going over an hour. And I'm like, oh, I've done the first edit and it's 5 hours long. Because I connect so much with the people, I don't know what to cut, but people expect longer times on podcasts as well. So you get that space to breathe, which I think is really important.
I mean,
I also consume podcasts at a startling rate. Like, I love them.
I think as far as the conversation is natural, like you were a guest in my podcast, one of each, and our episode together was 2 hours, and that was first episode. Everybody was like, our episode's gonna be like 2 hours. They're like, no, that was Ryan. He speaks a lot, but usually they're gonna be 1 hour. But from all those conversations, has any specific guest surprised you for like the way they approach the topic or specific story?
Most of them did. Ollie Patrick threw me for 6 because I'm a hypochondriac. Like, people who do know me know that I always have an ailment. And it was funny because I think it was kept in the show. On the day of speaking to him, I had an MRI scan on my shoulder. So all I wanted to really do is be like, what's up with my shoulder, Ollie? Can you do some of these like magic tests on me and find out what's wrong with me? But he just gives such practical advice. He's great for chefs because he also works with a lot of professional football teams in the Premier League in the UK. So he has a way of speaking, a very direct. There's no kumbaya, let's get zen, let's get around the campfire and sing songs together. He's very, very direct. It's why we also did a sports psychologist, because we knew that language would work. But Ollie kind of impacted me personally. Like I've cut coffee a lot since then. I go for walks now. I would never do, like the idea of going for a 20-minute walk. And it's amazing what it does to you, something that simple. He also said like I should be going in my garden with my socks off and touching the earth, but like I haven't gone that.
It's called grounding.
Grounding. So,
Paola tells me all the time, of course.
I haven't done that yet, but he also made me quite obsessed with the quality of my sleep. Like there's a lot of people wearing the Whoop rings now, no? And that's kind of what they do. They measure your two different types of rhythms. They measure your rhythm while you're working, the rhythm of stress, and they also measure the second rhythm, which actually Ollie calls rest and digest. How much are you resting and how much are you digesting? What's the quality of your recovery? And so I'm a late nighter. I'm like one of these people that comes awake at 10 and I do everything wrong. I look at my small phone screen, super bright, and I take that into the bedroom with me. So he really he's got me drinking a lot less coffee. He's got me taking walks and he's got me going to bed a little bit earlier. And it's so common sense. No, these are not huge things. But when you're waking up at 6 a.m. to be back into prep for lunch, it's even more imperative for chefs to think about these things.
But it's not a sexy topic. Most people go to fitness for entertainment, and you're doing like a mix of education and also health. It's hard to get chefs on board. It's probably hard to get sponsors on board because, again, people are looking for content to be entertained, to chill. Like, how was your approach there?
So we needed sponsors because if I didn't hire a producer, honestly, I'd be chasing my tail like one of those rabid dogs because there was just so many layers of the onion that needed to be peeled. It isn't a sexy topic, you're right. It's not, hey, we want to talk about mental health, we want to talk about wellness. I think you have to find brands that want to align and understand that this is important. I have two amazing sponsors. I didn't leave the slide on very much there when we started, but we're sponsored by San Pellegrino, who have spent their entire history as a 125-year-old brand supporting the restaurant industry. They care a lot about it. They run this amazing organization called San Pellegrino Young Chef, which is literally designed. This is millions and millions and millions of dollars they spend on nurturing the future generation of chefs.
So I'll give you one.
I wish. I wish. And so they're a lot of what they stand for is mentorship, mindful mentorship, nurturing. And we also managed to get some help from Accor. Accor is a hotel group through their wellness department. And they care passionately. They employ, because they have hotels around the world, they employ thousands of hospitality workers. So they really see the benefits in making some content that can help their own workers as well.
Okay, I'm gonna open the conversation because I think a lot of people have something to say or share. Feel free if you wanna share an experience or ask anything to Ryan from this study. But before doing that, we're talking about the future here these 2 days. And after going deep into these conversations with chefs, how do you see the future of the industry based on the well-being, the wellness of the people that are supporting the industry? Are you optimistic?
Yes, I'm very optimistic, yeah. One, because I think they care ethically. Chefs, restaurant owners, that industry cares ethically. Economically, this is an issue, and often economics will drive change more than ethics, unfortunately. But when you see those costs of onboarding, look, if I get together late at night with chefs, one of the major topics is hiring, the issue of hiring. And once you've hired and trained, keeping that person happy and on the team. And then the next point, I think, is that, and I'm not blowing smoke up the arse of the industry here, you are genuinely some of the most creative people out there in the world. If those invisible chips had existed, I wouldn't have been surprised. They could have come from the brain of some chef somewhere. So I think such a solution-based, such a creative industry will find the solutions here. Although it shouldn't be all on the industry. There needs to be bigger support. There needs to be more unions. There needs to be more governmental assistance around this topic as well.
And you mentioned OS and smoke.
Southernsmoke.org. OS benefits, if you want to look at healthcare for yourself or for your restaurant team, cooperative healthcare. The great thing about that is the more people that buy in, the more the cost gets reduced. Southern Smoke, if, hey, you've had a disaster and you need a relief fund to reopen the doors, or you want to use their project, which is called Behind You, which is to access free mental health care advice in the US specifically.
Did you come across any other source?
There's so many. There's
I mean, I'm sure you're going to share them.
There's the Burnt Chef Project, which I think is doing loads of great work here. There's another initiative called Ben's Friends, which is doing a lot of great help. I met, and we haven't spoke to her yet, and we're still debating because she's actually based in Ireland, but we met an amazing woman called Annette Sweeney, she's trying to basically get this in at the very young level. She wants this taught in culinary schools. So she's created like an educational program for colleges, culinary colleges and culinary schools, so that this starts from day one of trip. You're not just thinking about the julienne of your carrot or how well you can turn a potato. There's other issues that you can be taught about.
Okay, I know there's one more video you want to show, but before going there, I would like to open the conversation to the audience. I don't know if there's a mic around. If anyone has a question for Ryan about this work or wants to share a story about the topic, please feel free to do it. We only have like 7 minutes, so.
And if you want to do it privately, if you don't want to do it publicly, you can find me in the meditation pod in here. I'll be sat in there, zenned out like a Buddhist monk.
Please.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good, thanks.
I'm great. You are opening this conversation for the industry. I've been working a little bit on a project. I just wanted your thoughts a little bit. We're doing a challenge that is called the 86 Challenge, and it's for the industry. So
Great name.
Engage. Sorry?
Great name.
Yeah, you can engage 86 days, 27 or 54, but it's a challenge to stop drinking, doing drugs, meditating and all these things. Because I'm thinking that there's a way to do a movement all together and join it. And, what is your thought on that?
Amazing. First of all, the name is so on point as well for the industry. I'd love to speak to you more about it. And maybe we have a chat after, because they're the type of little initiatives that we want to highlight. And I think that's really good. And also, if it comes from a chef, there's also that point of the fuck is this guy? He's never cooked a day in his life in a professional kitchen, and now he's telling us how we should do kitchens. So the more that these things come from within the industry, the more that these ideas are being presented by people who work in the industry, they're way more powerful. So I think it's great, and I'd love to, let's swap cards, let's chat after, because I'd love to get you on the podcast.
Anyone else? One question there.
Ryan, thank you for your talk. You've been speaking from the point of view of what happens behind the kitchen, but what can we do as consumers, to support the teams that serve us on the table?
Yeah, I tried to mention that a little bit with those invisible chips. And the thing is, sometimes you don't know what's happening behind the closed doors of a kitchen. A lot of restaurants that are doing the right things will be highlighted. James Beard, the foundation, have really started to focus on specifically creating lists of restaurants, writing about restaurants that are focused on the sustainability of their staff. That's a brilliant initiative. Look for those messages on the menu. Look for that. We do tip sharing with the front of house and back of house. Read about the restaurant before, because often if they are doing something really cool, if they do have childcare or wellness days, or there's a chef in New York that gives a stipend to her team so that they can go out and just do creative things that make them feel good. And all of this gets written about. It gets PR'd and it gets written about. So I guess you've got to look a little bit. You've got to look a little bit behind that. Is it the best burger? What's going on? What do they stand for? Speak to the chef. Ask them. Because as a consumer, it's always your buying power, no? That's where you have a say in what happens, where you spend your money. Right. And understand it. Understand it a little bit more. Be a bit more sympathetic. Maybe a dish does arrive and it's not quite right, or a waiter gets something wrong. Understand the pressure that restaurants are under and how much they're dedicating to make your night special. And let's not give them a load of shit if they make one tiny little mistake. I mean, it happens to us all, and it also happens to chefs.
I have a bit of a follow-up question. I haven't seen it that much here in Miami, but I saw something in California. A lot of restaurants now have an extra charge for restaurants who pay healthcare to their employees. Where do you stand on that? Because
I'd like them to bake it into the cost of food.
Right. So,
because
as a business
we've become
owner,
too used to getting food too cheap, especially the really good stuff. We don't spend enough on it. And sometimes I also question, is there too many restaurants? Should there be 5, 6 free Michelin star restaurants in a city? It's an interesting debate. I don't want to close them because I eat in them and I love them, but I'd be much happier to see the costs baked in. I live in Paris, where people are paid really well. They only work 35-hour weeks, which drove Gordon Ramsay mental because he called the French fucking lazy. They get time off. Often people will work, even in the front of house, throughout a whole career. Much more likely to see a maitre d' in his 50s because he's made it a career for life, because he feels he's got the option to make it a career for life. And we don't pay tips, and they're a bit offended often if you ask for tips. It's changing a little bit. Some of the more international restaurants are doing it. I'd rather know up front what that chicken's going to cost me, and know that it's costing me $30 more because the farmer's paid well, the food chain is looked after, the people who cooked me that chicken were looked after, rather than get a surprise bill at the end with an added service charge.
I think we have time for one more, or here. Sorry, I thought somebody here left. Bueno, I'm gonna change a little bit the order. So before we go into the video, I want to after the video, we're gonna have some amazing lunch by Chef Chintan and Unapologetic Foods. Lunch is brought to us by Resiamex. So thanks again for making this possible. In the afternoon, we have basically closing the 2 days of amazing content with some sessions about sustainability, some surprise guests that we'll have at the end. And I've heard some rumors that there's like an after party or something like that going on. I'm not very sure. So be in the look when you're during the happy hour, if you see some hidden signs or something. I heard there's something going on. So Ryan,
just before we play this, I have one more video. Sorry, because I know that I pushed a lot of information on you throughout this, but this is actually a bit of a call to action for everyone, consumers and chefs. Every episode of the podcast starts with a phone call, and it's a voicemail that's been left for us of consumers, of regular people, of chefs sharing their best memories from the table. How has a table impacted you? And we were thinking about setting up a phone line, but actually the easiest way was to create a web page where you just go on, you press record, and you leave your story. You've got 2 minutes just to tell us about a restaurant that impacted you personally, a restaurant you have a great memory from, a restaurant that changed your community by impacting it and doing really cool things. So the dream for me would be, okay, I want listeners because I need listeners, and that would be very good. But much more than getting listeners would be to get amazing stories from you people. So we've got a little bit of a video to explain how this works, but I'd love to over the next few days, get some amazing stories from everyone here about what you think about restaurants.
Hey there, I wanted to tell you about a restaurant that really meant something to me when I was a kid.
I'm going to tell a story about a restaurant that 100% changed my life.
There's this Italian restaurant. A few years ago, we took our mom there to celebrate her 93rd birthday. They charmed her, showered her with compliments. She was so happy. My mom has since passed, and I'll never forget how special they made her feel.
Hello,
We love going to restaurants as a family. But there's one restaurant that we went to where it was so significant to us. One year we went, and as the sun was setting, my son stood up, his hand to the table, pushed himself up, and he came out. He told us that he was bisexual, that he really wanted support around it. We had this beautiful moment as a family. If we'd have been in our house, we may not have had that conversation.
Restaurants are special spaces. These pivotal places where we choose to live some of life's most important moments. The birthdays, the anniversaries, those first hellos, those last goodbyes. Heard is a new podcast series that focuses on the passionate people who create these spaces for us all to come together and bring our best to the table. And we need your help. We're looking for your stories, your special memories from the table. Did you meet the love of your life at a restaurant?
It was funny because when you went to the bathroom, my friend told me, hey, you gotta marry this girl. And I'm like, I just met her.
And 2 years later, we got married.
How did a restaurant truly make you feel?
Like I was an Olympic athlete being carried through the streets. They made us feel like champions.
Does your local restaurant deserve to be celebrated?
It was such an incredibly special place for the community.
We've set up a special Heard phone line for you to share these stories, to give thanks to those restaurants that truly deserve it.
Hey, I think you saved my life by giving me that soup all those nights.
Just dial the Heard phone line and leave us your story. Because great restaurant stories deserve to be heard.
As a grown-up now, I wonder if anything's ever going to top that sort of feeling in a restaurant.